Welcome back. As we mentioned, the week began with all the back and forth over the Prime Minister Netanyahu's speech, and it continued with more political fuss over emails from Hillary Clinton, and not to mention the fate of Obamacare back in the hands of the Supreme Court once again.
And to help us sort through it all, we're joined by Janet Hook, who covers politics for the Wall Street Journal, and Dana Milbank. He's a syndicated columnist for the Washington Post. Thanks so much for being here.
Pleasure. Sure.
So, you know, we're used to partisanship on Capitol Hill these days, but I wonder, Dana, did you find Senator Hatch's remarks that the White House was acting like a bunch of spoiled brats? Did that surprise you?
You're right that the actual sentiment doesn't surprise me, but the voicing that sentiment does, because he's usually sort of courtly and polite, and he can get his dander up, but that's quite harsh for that's Orrin Hatch's equivalent of a primal scream.
Yeah, he was obviously very disappointed with how things were. What do you think about his reaction?
Well, yeah, it really was quite a surprise coming from him. You know, Orrin Hatch, when he was elected, was considered a very, very conservative senator, but that was back in the 1970s, and now he is kind of what passes as a centrist, compromising moderate. It was also interesting that it came up in the context of foreign policy. I mean, that's why the whole speech was so remarkable, is foreign policy is supposedly where partisanship wanes, and this week it sure didn't.
You know, I got to ask you, at the end of the day, and this is several days later, of course, who is winning the argument over negotiations with Iran?
I wonder, I thought you were going to say who's winning in the negotiations, which is interesting because we actually have no idea what's going to happen in negotiations.
And we don't even know what's on the table.
We have no idea, but we're fighting about it right. As if we did. Look, I think, I mean, nobody wins in this situation because Netanyahu's visit and the circumstances around it, I think, have driven a wedge deep through the American Jewish community, and it's worsened the sort of political poison that we have here. And, you know, for 70 years or so, Israel has been a bipartisan or nonpartisan issue, and I suspect it will ultimately remain that way, but this is as close as it's gotten to becoming a political football. That's not good for Israel. It's not good for the United States either. I suspect it's going to rebound against Netanyahu, because it's going to stiffen the Democrats' resolve not to have sanctions at least before further sanctions, at least before the negotiations are complete. So he's going to get the opposite of what he sought, and everybody's stirred up and angry about it.
6 weeks ago, we had Mitch McConnell, the Senate Majority Leader, on as our guest on Capitol Download, and he said there are just a few things that might get through Congress this year with a Republican-controlled Congress and a Democratic White House, and that would be trade deals. But when we talked to Senator Hatch, who chairs the Senate Finance Committee, about the trade deals, he indicated that they are in some trouble. What do you make of that, Janet?
Well, yeah, and again, if Orrin Hatch can't get a deal, there aren't many Republicans who could. First of all, he is chairman of the Finance Committee, and that's the committee that really needs to cut the deal. It says as much about the state of the Democratic Party, though, as the Republicans, because there are a lot of Democrats who are really upset about Obama pursuing trade policies that they think hurt American workers in manufacturing. And, you know, they have time to do it before the real political silly season kicks in, but we haven't seen the crack in the dike yet.
Speaking of politics and perhaps the silly season as it gets started here, Hillary Clinton had a bad week in Washington for sure. Yeah, and you know, I was looking through Politico, and they quoted one activist as saying, talking about her email server and whether or not she violated protocol. He said, "This isn't a scandal, but it will make it harder for Hillary to attain that political new car smell." In other words, this is the Clintons we know and don't like so much.
Yeah.
Right. This sounds like the Rose Law Firm Whitewater billing records all over again, and that's the problem here. Is that it's not this email situation per se. Yes, it would probably violated the spirit of the law. Certainly violated policies. Probably didn't actually violate the law. But the problem for Hillary Clinton is a political one, and it goes back with this 2 decades or more of this back and forth about secrecy. And sort of obsessive confidentiality, going back to the, you know, her original healthcare task force and Whitewater. So I think it's going to be harmful to her because it builds on a theme that had already been out there.
Except, I gotta say, I have yet to meet a person who said to me, you know, I was on the fence about Hillary Clinton, and this is the thing that makes me think I can't vote for her. I mean, it kind of reinforces stereotypes and reinforces the perspectives of both friends and foes. You know, for Republicans, this is the quintessential Clinton thing, which is it's all about entitlement and secrecy and being above the law. And for her supporters, it's like, you know, there's a media witch hunt. Other secretaries of state had private, you know, email accounts. So it's kind of driving everybody deeper into their holes about Hillary Clinton.
Nina, you were in the Supreme Court for the arguments over the Affordable Care Act this week. Did you come away with a sense about how the court will rule on this?
Well, a little bit of it. To be in the Supreme Court chambers, not necessarily to see the justices. I was behind a curtain and a pillar, but I could hear them, and so I have a pretty good sense from that. You know, I think a lot of people had the feeling going in before the arguments there that this was a pretty serious threat to Obamacare, and this could really undo the whole thing. From what I listened to there and talking to folks after, it seems less likely that that's going to happen now. It's entirely possible. We don't know what 5 justices will do, but it does seem that they were having a lot of argument over nuance and ambiguity in the statute. And if you're going to take away health care from 8 million people, you probably want to have something more substantial to rest it on than ambiguity in the statute.
One word answer: do you believe Orrin Hatch when he says Republicans will come up with something to replace it if it is overturned?
Yes, they'll send condolence notes.
Janet, one word answer: yes, no.
Probably no.
All right.
Thank
so
you
much.
both for joining us.
Real good conversation. Up next, I'm going to have a conversation with Maryland Congresswoman Donna Edwards. We'll ask her why she skipped the Israeli Prime Minister's address to Congress and much more. Just ahead.